Well, hello. Today I'm going to show you how I made this 64 by 84-inch charity blanket using Quilt As You Go techniques on fleece. Yes, I even used Quilt As You Go to make this border. And even more, I used up leftover fleece and created this pieced backing. Let me show you how I did it. It's easy. Greetings and salutations. I'm so glad you stopped by today. Thinking a lot about Quilt As You Go. And I really like Quilt As You Go techniques, and there's so many of them out there. But sometimes I want to do something a little different, don't you? So behind me, I have my Wonky Stars quilt, and it's a charity quilt, as most of my quilts are these days. I'm just trying to use up my stash, and I'm trying to use what I have. Sometimes that works really well. Sometimes I have to improvise as I go. So I got to thinking about fleece. I have lots of scraps of fleece. So the first thing I did was I just made my rows and just left them as rows so that I could sew them together. I also numbered the rows because I have a pattern in the way the rows go, and I wanted to keep my pattern. So each row has a number at the upper left corner. This is going to help keep things in the same order. Now, as silly as it sounds, so far this is the easiest quilt back I've ever made because all I did was, well, sew it on one row at a time. Let me show you what I'm doing. As you can see, I have two different colors of fleece and more of some than others. So I've gone and I've decided I'm going to do alternating between this really pretty teal and white on the back. I have cut this fleece so that it matches 3 rows. Actually, I cut it so it matches 3 rows before I put the rows on because I wanted to give myself some wiggle room. Fleece does move around a little bit, but I can work with that if I've given myself that allowance for it to move or stretch. So let's put our first row on. Sometimes I think I can tell the right side of the fleece from the wrong side of the fleece. Is there a right and a wrong? Probably somebody out there knows the answer. Clearly I don't because I just flipped it over and now I think I'm using it the other way. So I'm putting my fleece on my table right side down, so wrong side up. And I'm going to take row number 1 and line it up on the edge. I'm going to pin base this just like I would any quilt, really. And we're just going to put 1 row at a time. Let me adjust my camera angle so you can see a little better. Work with the straightest edge I have. I did try to cut this pretty straight. Actually, it's not bad. We'll go with it. And I'm just going to pin base this in place to get my rows started. Now you can use whatever you want to use. I've got my good old quilting pins here. And I'm going to baste it more to one side. And then we're going to lay the next row on top of it. Just like you would pin baste the quilt to your quilt sandwich every 5 or 6 inches. Now, my blocks are 9.5 inches unfinished. So this row is, this backing I have cut at 29 inches. That gives me plenty of wiggle room if I don't sew straight or don't lay it down perfect. It'll all come out in the end. See how I'm swooshing and smooshing just like I would any pin basting project. Just trying to keep it straight and nice and flat. There we go. Now let's go get number 2. So here I have row number 2, and I know this is my top left corner. So I'm putting it right there so that if I fold it down, I've got row number 1 and row number 2, because we're going to pin baste this right sides together. This time I'm going to put my pins closer to where my seam is going to be. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Sherri, that looks like string piecing or foundation paper piecing, more string piecing, I guess. And you're right. It's a lot more like that. Because now this big row of blocks is my string. And this backing, this nice warm fleece backing, is my foundation. You'll also notice, probably, that I am trying to not only lay it flat, but I'm matching my block seams, because just like you would do it while you were, if you were just sewing these rows together, it's important that the blocks line up so it stays square. Each block, like I said, is 9.5 inches. I did start trimming them one day, and then I realized all I was trimming off was just a little piece here and a little piece there. So I decided they were actually kind of close enough. So I didn't even trim them. Again, it's okay. This is fleece backing. Fleece backing is going to stretch a little bit and give us some of that forgiveness that we're going to need. It also speeds this project up by, I can't even tell you, a factor of a gazillion. When I sewed these rows together, I did press the block seams open, because that works for me. You know, I'm not terribly worried about somebody coming along and accusing me of going rogue, because, well, if you've seen any of my other videos, I do go rogue. It's just the way it is. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and put a seam right here. And I'll show you what it looks like. Just finished sewing row 1 and 2 together, and I've got my pins out. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. So here's my numbers at the top left corner, row 1, row 2. So I know I've got them in the right order. I'm just kind of doing some finger pressing and smooshing, swooshing, swooshing, flattening. That's what we're doing. We're flattening. Because you know what we're going to do next? We're going to put row 3 on top of row 2, pin baste it, and sew it down. Can you see the beauty of this system? I'll be having a section of quilt that's only about 30 inches wide, and I can easily do that on my home machine. I think that's kind of magical. Now you could press this if you wanted to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But remember, if you decide to press this, you can't really use that hot iron that you would use just for the cotton because your fleece is synthetic. It's going to melt pretty easily. So I'm just going to flatten it out. And actually, the cotton is kind of seating really well on this fleece. The fleece is kind of grabbing onto it, maybe with some static electricity or something. I don't know. Have we got a scientist in the room that can tell us about that? There we go. Now let's put row number 3, pin baste it, and sew it to row number 2. There's my number 3. We're going to line it up with our seams here and put a pin in it. I'm going to do that all the way down and sew it. And I'm going to show you how you can connect these rows to each other without sashing. So stick with me. Just finished adding row 3 to row 2. And we're going to open it out and flatten it down. And then I'm going to repin it because we're going to cut off the extra fleece and square this up. The beauty of this technique is you can work in any size rows you want to. You can do them one at a time, probably. I wouldn't, but why not? You know, just by having this quilt in segments makes it so much easier to manage on a home machine. And you know, I just thought of this. If you wanted to add quilting on each block, you could do that before you add the next row. So you could add a lot more quilting if you choose to, and then you're still only working with this much fabric at any given time. So it really opens up a world of possibilities. So I started this quilt, as I often do, with an idea, and then I have to make it work in a way that I didn't expect I would have to make it work. So for example, I wanted to do all of these blocks with just this teal polka dot in the background and all of the stars with the prints. I didn't have enough of the teal background to do that. So then I started changing it up and using the teal for my wonky stars and the novelty prints for the backgrounds. It does add some interest. I still have fabric left to make borders. Yep, we're going to add borders to this. And you are going to be shocked to see yet another technique for Quilt As You Go to add borders. I have 3 rows attached to my teal binding. This is rows 1, 2, and 3. And I have the bottom 3 rows attached to the teal fleece. So this is 6, 7, and 8. And I've got the fleece trimmed to the current width of the rows. Now in the middle, I'm using a piece of white fleece. And yep, you guessed it. That means rows 4 and 5 are on the middle row. But we have to have a way to attach them to the top 3 and the bottom 3. And that's where this comes in. I am going to take, there's row 4, and there's row 5. So to the top of row 4, I am going to sew a 1-inch piece of facing. Now this I cut from the background fabric. I had enough of that to do it. You could use white. You could use bias tape. All we're going to do is give ourselves a little extra room so that we can top stitch this piece to the next piece. Let me show you what that looks like. Here's row number 4. Here's the top of it. This is where we'll connect row number 3. Put these right sides together and just attach it. And then we're going to press it over to make a crisp finished edge. Okay, I finished row 4. Now on row 5, we're going to sew it on the bottom so that we can attach to rows 6, 7, and 8. So there's my number that tells me this is the top. So here's where I'm going to sew my 1-inch piece of facing. I'll bring you back when I've got this done and pressed, and we'll put it all together. I've just sewn on my facing piece here. And I don't want to assume that people know how to press facing pieces, but this is a really important step so that we get that nice crisp edge that we can top stitch down. So anytime I'm working with facing pieces, I want to first set the seam and lay it flat. Then we're going to have a nice crisp edge that we can turn over for our top stitching. So you'll notice how I'm flattening as I go. I'm keeping this in the back so it's going up. You don't have to. You do you. It's just the way I've always done it. And once that edge is nice and crisp, then we can come back and with just our fingers roll it so that that seam literally comes right to the edge. And then we press it down. See how close that is? this facing piece will not show at all. It will not change the size of our blocks because we use that 1/4 inch seam to attach it. And that means it lines up perfectly with the row that we're going to connect it to. Voila! Let's go create our center section and connect it to the ends. We're back at the sewing table or our work table, and I've got my fleece down. I've got row number 4 here. And just like when we started the teal, I'm going to pin baste row number 4 down, leaving just a wee edge here, which we're going to square up. Then I'm going to lay row number 5 right on top of it, just like we did on that end piece. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Sherri, this is a great technique if you're making a baby blanket or a throw. But what if you want a big blanket, twin size, or even bigger? Well, I actually have the answer to that because we're going to add some borders to this. And we are going to make it twin size. Here's row number 5. Now let's line them up and get them pin basted and sew them down. You should, I hope, notice that our facing piece is on opposite sides of each other because this is where we're going to join to the top and the bottom of the quilt. We are going to join the 2 pieces of fleece and 1 piece of the row, and we're just going to clip them along like this. So that we stabilize that row and its connection to the backing. I'm going to leave this piece with the facing well away. I'm just going to clip all this in place because it's already secured also by our basting pins. Then I'm going to sew this all together. I'll see you back in a minute when I've sewn it together. You can see my stitching line here. I'm going to take this and just cover it and use a straight pin to hold this in place. Sure I am. There we go. And I've lined up my block here so that I'm preserving the squareness of the quilt and getting all my seams lined up. And I'm going to top stitch right along here. Now, in terms of top stitching, use whatever color you want. I've got so many colors going on here. I could do literally anything. But I do have a color that's like this green, maybe a little darker, but I think that would work really well. Now, just because I trimmed my fleece, if you don't want to trim the fleece down, you don't have to. You're covering that seam up completely. So it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to go all the way down and get this put in place and do a little top stitching. Wow, it has taken a minute to get this quilt under control. Mostly because my kitchen is out of control. I'm still under construction, but I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. I'm loving the way this quilt is turning out. Let me show you what that seam looks like once it's folded over and top stitched. It was very easy to do, and because that facing piece was on there, I just pinned this down and was able to top stitch it. Let me give you a closer look so you can see, and then we're going to add some borders. So here we are. This is my faced piece that turned over, and I'm using that greenish color. And honestly, it really turned out well. So I've connected it, these 3 rows to these 2 rows to these 3 rows. And on the first one, I did a lot of trimming, but when I came down to this other row, I didn't trim as much, and I actually think it worked a little easier. So I'm happy with the way this lays. And I've added on the back, let me show you what that looks like. So this fleece on the back, because of the way I used the white in the center, when I did the top stitching, it blends right in to this teal color that's on the back. So it looks terrific. Still not big enough, so we're going to add a border, and I'm still doing Quilt As You Go. We're going to do this. I have these tan pieces, and I have my border pieces cut already. And this is super simple. You lay them so your border piece is face down on the quilt, and your fleece piece is face to face on the back, and then you just stitch it along, and it opens right out and hides that seam. So this entire quilt, including borders, is Quilt As You Go, which I think is fantastic. I'm really having fun with this. Let me show you how it works again. So here's my border for my fleece. It's longer than I need, but just like when you're doing your backing and your batting, you want to give yourself some wiggle room, and that's what I've done. So I'm just going to quickly use my clips, and we're going to just sort of put this along the edge. Okay, so I've got it kind of in the neighborhood of where I want it. Now we're going to get down to the details and get it nice and flat and lined up. So my fleece is face to face, right sides to right sides, if you have a right side to your fleece. Now I'm going to take my first border, which are these fun little ladybugs. I'm going to line these edges all up. Ah! You can use clips. It works. It takes a lot of clips. I've actually discovered that my straight pins work a little bit better just because there's so much thickness here and because these fabrics are a little slippery. And I'm putting them perpendicular to my seam, making sure everything's lined up here. And I'll take them out as I'm sewing. But this is how I'm going to line the whole thing up. Take your time, make sure everything's flat, make sure you're getting all your edges even. If you want to keep using pins, you can use pins. If you want to use clips, whatever you prefer. Maybe it's a combination that I need so that things don't wiggle around. There we go. You'll notice I'm also sitting at a table. This is just a standard 6-foot table. There's nothing fancy about this. And I really like sitting to do this. It's just so much easier on my old body. I'm not a spring chicken, you know. And I bet my camera's too far away. You can't really see what I'm doing. So give me a minute and let me adjust things so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay, making sure my fabric is lined up with my fleece. I've got it nice and flat. I'm going to put my pin in like this to hold all the layers. If you want to use clips, you can use clips. Just whatever you like. Let's use a clip here to show you. Now these borders I have cut to 5.5 inches, so they'll finish at 5 inches. And when I'm all done with this, I'm going to have a twin-sized blanket. Again, remember, quilting is decorative, yes, but the real reason we do quilting is to hold our sandwich together. Well, I don't have a sandwich here. I just have layers of fabric. And so I could add some more quilting to it. It would be fine. But because I was working in small sections, I elected to just let the rows hold themselves together, and they will. It will not be a problem at all. Because fleece is not going to go anywhere. Unlike your cotton batting or wadding, fleece isn't going to move much, isn't going to shrink. It stretches a little while you're sewing, which is probably the biggest downside. See how I'm getting all these layers together, making sure I've got everything there. I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this bulk off, just for ease of handling. I'll square it off here in a minute. Because I just want to make sure everything's nice and flat and even. Okay, I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch, taking my pins and my clips off as I go. I'll be right back. I tell you what, one of the biggest advantages of quilting as you go is you can always control where the quilt is, and it can always be to the left so that you're not jamming it up under here. And I really like Quilt As You Go for that reason. I'm just going to go ahead and sew this on. When I get to the end, I'll show you how it unfolds and hides that seam perfectly. I've just got the last border sewn on, and I'm getting ready to turn it over and trim the ends, but I wanted to give you a quick pro tip. I did discover that this fabric moves around because these are pretty good size chunks. This one's a 9-inch finished block. So I used some basting pins along the way just to keep this block from moving around. Even though I had clips and everything along the edge, it really just helped to stabilize it. So as you're going, leave some pins just to help keep things together. And this is just magical. So here's the top of my blanket, and you can see that border folds out and looks really nice. There's the back of the fleece, and when you pull this fabric over, it just engulfs and encloses that seam. Voila! You can add more quilting here if you'd like. Given that I only have these 2 pieces of uh, fabric, the top and the fleece, I'm probably not going to, because I am going to put binding on here. Easy peasy. One. Well, here it is. My Wonky Stars Quilt As You Go on fleece with borders. Wasn't that fun? And look at the back. I was able to use big pieces of fleece left from other blankets and charity projects, but I used it to make the back really interesting. Some kid is going to love this. And I loved it too. It was so much fun making those wonky star blocks. And using this Quilt As You Go technique, you can make these blankets as big as you want because all of the weight stays to the left, and you just build it a little bit at a time. I hope you had as much fun watching this video as I had making it. Thanks, and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it.